Hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions about media and production 24/7. If you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching on Alex's channel or on Pixel Core, you can always sneak over to officehours.global and get involved here. You enter your questions by using the QR code that's on the screen on the bottom here or by going to officehours.global. Typically, we go into our Q&A right now, but today we have a very special guest, Roberto Musso, the technical director at NDI.video. NDI 6 has just been released. Everybody's talking about it, so we're super lucky to have Roberto here to help us understand it. Roberto, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you.
Great. Welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here to help our audience understand.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here.
So Alex is going to ask you a few questions about NDI 6, but let's, do you have something you'd like to kind of give us an opening about what it's all about?
Oh, well, we just added 2 more bits.
How many bits do you have
important
now?
Bits. Yeah, exactly.
We moved to 10-bit. We support HDR. Has been an interesting path, I would say.
What were the key? So you've moved from 8-bit to 10-bit. What were the key challenges with moving from 8-bit to 10-bit?
Oh, a lot of R&D work, of course. I mean, R&D have done an amazing job because then, every time we change something in NDI, there is always an implication about, what happened next, what happened with old product. And so we always try to make change and to warranty a good user experience. We really care about the user. Of course, when you move from 10-bit, when you add these 2 more bits, you change everything, even the interoperability within product. But what we are trying to do is we're trying to make the right move. But I would say mainly is R&D that did something really magic, as usual.
Yeah, and I mean, because it has been huge. I mean, we request 10-bit in HDR of everyone we work with, and they're always like, "Oh, we're working on it." And it's like there's a lot of work there because it changes how things composite. It changes how things, are transported. It changes a lot. Now, when it comes to HDR, what are the what HDR protocols are you supporting?
So we support PQ and HLG.
That's great. Fantastic. So the PQ curve and the HLG curve, and it is there anything that that's still kind of, and is that I'm not saying is that all you release for NDI 6. I just don't want to miss anything else because that's the huge lift. Is that the main upgrade for NDI 6? Oh, I think we might have lost you.
Oh, it looks perhaps frozen.
Oh, I'm back. I'm back.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that beside the 10-bit HDR, I would say that the biggest news is bridge for embedded device. Mm-hmm. Because in my opinion, and 10-bit HDR was something that we had to do to be, compatible with the new world coming. The new world of production is 10-bit HDR, period. Right. But if I must say what really excites me is a bridge for embedded device. So we spend probably 2 years, finalizing and developing bridge as a technology.
And can you describe for our viewers a little bit about what bridge is?
Oh, yeah, sure. So bridge is a piece of software that allow you to interconnect not device, but infrastructure. So you have it is a software application that you run in a computer in your NDI infrastructure. And in another remote NDI infrastructure, you run another bridge and you interconnect the 2 bridge. You have one host and one join or multiple join. And what happens is that then you interconnect infrastructure. Is not only device to device, but is infrastructure to infrastructure. And the user experience is really like, adding another infrastructure to your infrastructure. So you see all the device all the remote device. You can receive all the NDI stream from all the remote device. It supports all the metadata, all the user experience like PTZ control, KVM, etc. So it's much more than connecting device over internet. And now we add this possibility to device. So if a manufacturer run NDI Bridge into a camera, or, my dream is always to see, for example, a digital audio mixer using NDI Bridge. Because then, of course, NDI is not only video, it's audio, it's metadata. So potentially, this open a complete new opportunity, use case, etc.
Absolutely. And Jeffrey, I know you had a question or two.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been playing with the protocol last 24 hours. It's been amazing. I love the idea. I haven't really gotten a chance to do the alpha channel yet. That's going to be a game changer for graphics and things like that. But my question is HX and backwards compatibility. Will HX become 10-bit in some way? Will it be functional?
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So HX and is this it's full? Is it fully released right now? People can download it.
Oh yes, yeah,
it's great, fantastic. And where do you still see need for? Where are you going after? Now that you've got HDR done, because I know that HDR had to have been just a huge lift, or 10-bit, a huge lift that kind of probably put a lot of other things to the side. What are you excited about kind of focusing on out now that Bridge and 10-bit are out? What do you see, as much as you can tell us, about NDI's roadmap from here?
Our next focus will be on audio, because we have so many requests, of having more, even not tools, but, to support our customer, our user needs on the audio domain. We know that there are very interesting opportunity, because of course, NDI is completely different to other audio over IP technology like AS67 or Dante or whatever. We don't have the same synchronization layer, but this can be a big advantage in some use case where you don't need the synchronization. And this is probably, this is, for example, remote production, cloud production, where you cannot have synchronization, or where, extremely low latency is not really needed. There are so many use cases where NDI can be used for audio production. And this is going to be the next focus, most probably.
That's fantastic. It's really, really great. We're so excited to have you here. We just wanted to have you come on and explain the launch and what you were releasing, and give us a little bit of an insight. We're going to be catching up with you again at NAB, hopefully, and then once we've digested this new release in a month or two, we're hoping to have you on for a whole hour, and we'll really talk through it.
Anytime.
Really.
Oh, the other news, and I'm really excited about it, because it is showing our, interest in we release NDI router for Mac.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, we really want to improve the Mac user experience with NDI, and this has been the first step forward.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic. Thank you again for your time here, and we're really looking forward to learning more about it. And we'll keep. We're doing a lot of work with internally with NDI as well as with Vector, as you know, and so we're really excited to see how all of these things start to tie together into the work that we're doing. So we're really, really glad to have you on, and we look forward to seeing you at NAB.
Sure. See you soon. Thank you for having me.
Really, really great. We're really excited to have you. Thank you so much. All right, thanks.
Bye.
Fabulous. I was going to talk a little bit about our plans for NAB and about our plans for the Eclipse, which is coming right up, but that was excellent to have a guest that we couldn't get otherwise. So let's just get into our Q&A. We'll talk a little bit about those other things at the top of the next hour. So Robert, what have we got on our question queue for this morning?
Good morning. We start with Scott Hancock all the way from Tokyo, looking at the M4250 series to upgrade our 8-port router for NDI. What are the advantages of using managed over less expensive unmanaged? Our use is pretty simple. PTZ cameras and decoders control 3 to 4 computers for vMix and Teams, all local.
And we're going to start with Guy Cochran this morning. Guy?
Yeah, it's a good idea to take a look at the M4250 line. There's really 4 or 5 reasons to do it. The first is the time savings. There's profiles in there that are set for NDI and Dante, so you can VLAN out these ports, and this makes it so that with a managed switch that can control these ports, you're not colliding data. So if you have internet or if you have a NAS and you have other people on there and they're throwing data around, these things can collide and cause dropouts. So that's one of the biggest reasons. The other thing is the green settings. So energy savings can really be a bear on a $29 switch that you pick up off Amazon. Those are fine for your just basic stuff, but when you start throwing video around, especially the bigger bandwidth, like Roberto was just talking about, 10-bit, 1080p 60. I don't know what the bandwidth requirements are yet, but on one of these 4250s, the back plane, there's actually enough support across. So if you look at the specs on these, you can throw enough data around on all the ports at the same time. On some of the other ones, you might be able to get on an 8-port switch, maybe there's only enough bandwidth for 6 of those ports, and you got to actually look at the specs. And these ones, you can avoid those bottlenecking by throwing too much data through it. So like this one has a SFP port where you can throw a 10 gig. So you could have all 1 gigs and then a 10 gig uplink. So if you have like a special vMix computer or something that requires 4K and you want to throw all the bandwidth from a number of the 1 gig sources, you can do it with these switches. So those are a couple of things. The settings with IGMP snooping, MDMS, IGMP Plus, those are all reasons why you want to look at the 4250. It'll save you hours of time to just get the right switch. So that's it in a nutshell.
Nigel, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, when I first set up my Dante network, I thought, I don't need a managed switch. It's okay. I'm not going to move that much traffic around. It's really going to make any difference. Never really worked. The devices never showed up consistently. You couldn't manage it. You couldn't do any of that. So I set down the path of starting to buy managed controllers. And I now have a crate full of cheap managed controllers that were worth exactly what I paid for them. I then stopped and I watched the video, which I've posted for you in the chat, which is from a Netgear product manager. It's an hour long. But interestingly enough, the most interesting part for me is the wrap-up, which starts about 45 minutes in, when he'll walk you through what all the products in the 4250 line is and what makes them different. And following that, what I decided to do is to buy one of the 10 gig backbones and then start putting routers off that. And I can tell you, I've done networking on and off for many decades, and it's the hardest thing, I think, in technology and IT is getting networking right. And the profiles that were just described and the way they work is really very easy. And once I got things set up, it took like 10 minutes, and I've never touched it again.
Nice. Let's go to the next question.
Sam Rhymes from Maidenhead writes in, how can learning the principles of set design improve production values in virtual production and content creation?
And Courtney's going to start us off. Courtney?
I'm not sure how much use it would be because, set design is dealing with the real world, maybe materials, learning what surfaces reflect light and how light interacts with different materials. That might be useful in designing virtual sets, because in the virtual world, you don't have any of the problems that you have in building physical sets. A lot of times they would build sets with a forced perspective to make a set look a lot deeper than it really is. Well, you don't need to do that if you're in a volume, because that perspective is generated by the computer. You don't have to worry about the fact that your stage is only 24 feet deep, So I think materials handling, materials and how they reflect light and lighting and camera position would be probably better to study than set design, because it doesn't necessarily apply for a lot of the problems with dealing with virtual sets.
Alex?
I think that the real challenge with virtual sets is that oftentimes they just don't look very real. And it's because folks aren't looking at real sets. and really looking at what the limitations of those real sets. You can go past that, but if you look at most virtual sets that are done by big broadcasters, they're designed to be much bigger than they could afford to do, but they are designed to feel like a real set. Now, those sets may move around a little bit and so on and so forth. So looking at those sets, and there's a lot of some basic stuff of what colors do you use, how deep does it need to be, and I spend a lot of time when I'm building virtual sets. I spend a lot of time looking at real sets, looking at what the sets do, looking at how they operate, looking at because a lot of times when we're working we're trying to make something feel real, we want it to feel as organic as we can inside of that virtual world often, not always. But I think that the mistake that people make when they don't pay attention to the real sets is that they build these sets that, they just look a little goofy. And it's pretty common for people to build goofy looking sets, and so when they're working in the virtual world. And so I think that there's a real, you want to be able to look at that. One thing, by the way, that when I'm brainstorming, I've really gotten into Midjourney, where I ask Midjourney to design a set for a YouTuber or design a set for a broadcast, and I can produce hundreds of versions of it. And it's looking at everything else and giving it back to me as ideas. And it's been really effective at me. I don't use anything that it generates, but it lets me brainstorm really effectively. And but I would definitely look at really study a lot of sets. In fact, that's probably a good one for us to do on a Tuesday or whatever from a set perspective. Is just do a second hour and just looking at sets, and that might be even a Friday or a Thursday or whatever. But we'll take a look at that of really talking about that in more detail. It's a good question.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. There's some things that I think, the artistic side of it, how do you present something that works? You're doing it in conjunction with the show you have to do. The one thing that you're freed from is in traditional theatrical set designs, you're spending a lot of time and effort on figuring out how to get things on set stage, how to get things off stage, where to store it when it's off stage. All of that obviously completely disappears. So that part of traditional set design doesn't have to impact what you can do in the virtual production space. So in one sense, I think it could be freeing, and maybe the constraints of practical set design won't transfer. So no reason to spend a lot of time working on that. Courtney, you had a follow-up?
I just had a crazy idea. A lot of times in virtual sets, they will design, because a lot of times you don't have a ceiling. I mean, not in virtual sets, but in real sets, you don't have a ceiling. So you have to design your sets to look like there's a ceiling, but because you're lighting from overhead, you can't have a practical ceiling in there. And then I started thinking, well, what about the boom? You don't have to deal with boom shadows, because, they're not going to cast a shadow on the virtual set. And that one of the problems with virtual sets is that they make a lot of noise, and they are funny shapes. So the closer you can get a boom microphone into the person, the better. But since you're doing an in-camera composite, basically, there's no way to paint the boom out. I was wondering if there's a way to create an overlay that is composited in, that matches the vanishing point and perspective of the camera, to cover up the boom so that it becomes invisible with the background virtual set.
Like cloning on a flat surface, but
it's an alpha zero object. I don't know. I mean, it's something that we do in 3D a lot. Is render something out that will generate an alpha. Basically, you're generating an object that has no alpha channel. So it just goes into the background.
So it overlays the top of everything else.
Yeah.
Right?
So you could definitely build something in there that would do that. You could also do a garbage matte that was, but it just depends if you're moving the camera around. Then you would need a 3D object that would go around the virtual thing. But I haven't done it in Unreal, but in every 3D package that I've used, that's a possible way to do it.
Yeah, the trick would be balancing the exposure for the digitally inserted information with the light coming through the camera from the virtual wall behind, because it's going to be different.
What I'm saying is that you would be able to, I think you would be able to render an object that is knocking a hole I think it would be
covering
doable,
up
but
part of the sun. Yeah.
We would probably use a garbage matte before we did that, and probably if it was hanging in there. But it's an interesting thought of having a box that you build in 3D that goes around where you track where the boom mic was, and have it be invisible. I think it's doable, but it would be a little bit of thinking to figure that out. But
they do it all the time now in regular production with regular sets. But like I say, it's a lot harder if you're doing an in-camera composite, because with a virtual set, because
I mean, most of the time with virtual sets, you're not moving dramatically. You know, like you're moving a little bit, but not a lot. You can probably, but it's an interesting. But I think it should be.
Lose the boom and just get a laugh. That's too much work.
Well, that's what the cameraman's going to say.
The biggest challenge still with digital sets is really, I mean, for me, the biggest challenge with digital sets is aliasing. So anti-aliasing is the biggest problem that we see with virtual sets, where there's just a subtle amount of aliasing that goes on if you're doing a true 3D set. And I think Unreal in the last upgrade has made it a lot better, but it's one of those things because what you need to do to get rid of that aliasing is to oversample. So if you're doing a 1080p, you need to render it at 4K or even 8K, and then in real time scale it back down to 1080p, and that will mush the pixels together. And that's a technical term, mush. It'll mush the pixels together, and that will get rid of your aliasing that goes along. And where you see that, by the way, if you're working with someone who does a lot of real time, the first thing they look at is every line that is angled, every curved line, every circle. Like you immediately start looking at all these things, looking for looking for the little stair steps, and that's the thing that we're still, I think a lot of people are still working on.
Mickey's mad at me because I said lose the boom. Sorry, Mickey. Let's go to the next question.
Like, sacrilege.
Sacrilege.
All right, from Douglas Carmichael, I read an article in SVG about sports venues that opt for concert quality PAs partially because the tours expect it. Could this be to fill in gaps in coverage, or would we ever see tours at that level not carrying a PA?
Interesting question. Alex, what do you think?
I think it's almost impossible to think that tours would not carry their own PAs. I think that maybe having this to be able to do better announcements and better music throughout the event so that it's a better experience overall makes sense. But tour, the problem is that all of your PA is, when Claire Brothers is building this out in Lidditz or whatever, that's a very, very complex network of audio. And everything is tuned to know exactly what it is. The idea of going into a venue and then re-acclimating to that venue seems like suicide, like especially at a large venue. Now, if you're talking about a small venue, that's pretty common. If you talk to a small artist that's not playing arenas and they're putting in really high quality, a lot of these small venues. I went to see Wilt. This is a little band starting band that was down in San Francisco, and they didn't have any of their own PA. so they come in and they use what's at the venue. So those kinds of things for smaller artists that aren't playing arenas yet. Wilt may end up playing an arena, but they're not playing them yet. I would highly recommend. By the way, they're on tour, and I would highly recommend seeing them. Anyway, but they. If you're talking about smaller venues, probably up to 1,000, you might end up with something that made sense because these are much smaller systems. If you're talking about arenas, none of those tours are going to want to interact with anybody else's equipment. Like they just want it to be empty, an empty shell that they arrive in, and then they fill. So I think that's that. So it could work in smaller places though.
Well, let's sneak on to the next question.
From Andy Korkendorfer, Vieira, Florida. Can you recommend an audio meter app to show levels upon remotely managed Mac Minis? Thanks.
Alex.
There's a couple, the two major options for this. I mean, there's probably a couple other ones that I don't know about, but the ones that we use particularly for this type of thing, the less expensive one is it's by a company called Loud Lab, and this is called Sonic ATEM. And so you have lots of different metering options. And so you have levels, but you also have level history. You have a spectrogram, leisure meter. Like all of these things are available. Now this is a good one. It's $75. It's a very solid solution. It doesn't handle surround super well. And so the other one that we've used for the last decade is called Spectre. Spectre was available for a long time and then not. Then it dropped off the list for a while. They were kind of in between, but it was picked up by Synaptic, and it's sold as part of a larger bundle. So it's a little bit more expensive because you have to get the whole bundle that's there now. So the bundle is $375, but Spectre is an amazing app for audio. That's the one we use when we're really doing production. Sonic ATEM is one we put on a lot of machines because it's less expensive. It does a pretty good job of everything that we need, but it isn't quite the level of detail that Spectre is.
Let's go to the next question.
From Jeff Veely, Henderson, Texas, what do you think are the chances that autofocus will be available within Blackmagic cameras in the near future?
I wouldn't. Alex, what do you think?
Slightly greater than zero. So I'm not saying it has autofocus. So 100% chance it can have autofocus. So they have autofocus right now. If you push the autofocus button on a Blackmagic, what you're talking about is constant autofocus. So being able to, like, if you look at this camera here, you can see that it changes to my hand and then it changes back to me. That's hard. So this is a Sony FX30. We're using a bunch of Sony cameras at NAB. One of the main reasons we're doing that is because in the field when you're moving around, I was all Blackmagic for a long time. I was talking to a creator and I asked her why she uses Sony's, and she's like, autofocus. Like that. That's why we use it. And so if you're running and gunning, if you're in a film environment, which I think Blackmagic really has envisioned their cameras for, no one uses autofocus in film. So you have someone pulling focus, and so that's a much different process, and you don't necessarily need it. But the problem that Blackmagic has is because they don't build a box, like an Arri or a Venice or a Komodo or anything else out there. They don't build a box. A lot of filmmakers are kind of like, well, that's not really that's not the pipeline we're used to, and so they kind of get halfway in between. They don't have the box to make it film, but they don't have autofocus to make it something available for everybody. So it's a hard place for Blackmagic to be. So it would be great for them to do that. They're not. I don't think they're going to. I think if they do this, the next generation is really looking at the Ronin 4D, and it's using LiDAR to make that decision. So all its autofocus is built on distant, LiDAR, rather than trying to do the multi-point stuff that is being done. And Sony does that better than anyone else in the world. But I think that the next generation would be a LiDAR sensor, and potentially even a LiDAR sensor that sits outside of the camera that you would attach it as a piece that would run it. And there's some people who are using the phones to do that right now with the Blackmagic camera. But it's still something it's hard. I think that the two big challenges for Blackmagic is to figure out how they're going to do some version of autofocusing and how they're going to get to global shutter. And if they can do those two things with their cameras, they really will have something that is. They have great cameras right now. I've got a whole slew of them, so they're great cameras. But those are the big challenges I think for them that they have to answer in the next 2 years.
And remember, Blackmagic makes cameras. They do not make lenses. They make lens mounts on their cameras, and they expect you to go outside and determine whether or not you want EF lenses or PL lenses. PL lenses are typically things that have focus control. They're trying to pass the commands from the lens manufacturers into the camera and react to it in real time as close as possible. And it's just harder to do. It's easier for a company like Sony, who makes the camera itself and the lens system, to integrate everything and make sure it's reported correctly and it works just fine. But when you can take any of 100 lens manufacturers' lenses and mount them to your Blackmagic camera, getting all of that correct to do autofocus, it's a big lift. And so I agree with Alex 100%. It's not zero, but it's going to be a long time before we get robust autofocus communication and protocol back and forth into a Blackmagic camera. That's my 2 cents worth. Let's go on to the next question.
From Peter Rosado, Las Vegas, Nevada, CineGear is going to Warner Brothers Studios in June. Is Office Hours planning to cover it? And we have a link here to cinegearexpo.com.
We're starting with Courtney, then going to Alex. Courtney.
I just registered yesterday. I have my speed badge ready to go. Warner Brothers is a much more spread out studio, so I don't know if they're going to allow them more room or how they're going to handle that. But it'll be different. It's always been at Paramount for the last 4 or 5 years. It was at Universal 1 year, maybe 10
It was
years.
at LACC, I think, a year. I think when you covered it, I think it was at LACC, which I really wish it would go back.
Los Angeles Community College?
No, the convention center.
Conventions.
Los Angeles Convention Center, yeah.
Yeah, it was there during the pandemic, I think. But this year, I think they're going to be at Warner Brothers, so it'll be interesting to see. Although it might be a little more spread out. They do have a very nice theater, like for showing the film stuff. The SGI theater there.
Like the Sherry Lansing at Paramount. Alex?
Yeah, we're going to take a look at it. I have to admit, I'm going to. I don't do this very often, but the NAB has turned. We've got incredible support from Zoom, from NAB, from Sony, from from lots of our partners. Vislink is I have a Vislink cup showing up here very soon, and we've had some great partners. It's also still a huge cash outlay for us to produce the show, and so whether we do CineGear or not is also whether we can recover from NAB. So we're gonna, if you're interested in helping us recover from NAB, you can go to but you can just go to officehours.global/donate. We could really use the help because I am trying to make a hard decision about CineGear. These are pretty expensive. Every time we go, it costs a bunch of money to get these things done, and this NAB is a much larger lift than the past. I mean, it's the outlay is probably going to be in the ballpark of $10,000 on top of all the benefits that we've gotten from other folks. So if you are interested in helping with NAB, make sure to go to officehours.global/donate. We could use your help, and then that'll help us decide whether we can afford to do CineGear. So let us know.
Next question.
From Jacob Goodnight, Indianapolis, Indiana, what tools or techniques could you use to enhance your Total Solar Eclipse viewing experience safely? Example, building a pinhole projector.
Alex.
It really depends on whether you're having a full eclipse. So for totality, you don't need. You can look at totality. You just can't look a second before or a second after. So you really need to take that into account. So if you're in the path of totality during totality, you can take off your sunglasses and look up. If you are 99% in, you cannot. So just so you know, it is the 99% means nothing. And really, I will tell you that if you're anywhere within a couple hours of being able to see totality, the difference between totality and partial, even 99%, is night and day, literally. It is still a daylight experience at 99 and a weird nighttime experience at totality. And so, but otherwise, pinhole projectors. There's also, I've seen people talking about using. I haven't tried it. Is using a strainer, and it'll go through
colander. I've seen people do that has circular holes, and then you can see a bunch of little projections of the eclipse. Yep. Your little circular hole projections will all be partial with a little quarter sun thing.
Yeah. So those are some of the options.
Courtney?
I've always wondered why people just don't take a piece of black plexiglass or some not look through it, but look at the reflection. Use it to reflect the sun and just look at the reflection in the plexiglass. That way it wouldn't be reflecting the full power of the sun. And you look at reflections off car windshields all the time of the sun without damaging your eyes.
When I was in grade school, we had a partial eclipse, and I know we built like a tent. It was like this giant, I think of it now as giant, but I think I was 10 years old. So
it was 4 by 6 feet.
It was less giant, but it was like this huge thing you could walk into, and it had a pinhole, and it showed it as a kind of a projection. And it was
camera
cool.
obscura. Yes.
Yeah, camera obscura. Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Well, we're excited about the fact that it's coming up, and we will cover whatever actually happens. Fingers crossed. We talked a lot in the pre-show today about cloud cover and things like that, and there's no way anybody can control any of that. Hopefully, with this idea of progressive, we'll have some call-ins from along the path, and hopefully someone along there will have really good cloud issue, or won't have cloud issues. We'll have a clear sky, and we'll be able to see some of it. So we'll keep you up to date as we get closer. Let's move on to the next question.
From Mark Nezeth, San Antonio, Texas, just a comment. There was a discussion yesterday regarding changing the Anker logo on the rig Alex was working on. If you look up dry brushing, painters use this technique for electronics or anything with a diaphragm for safe color matching.
Oh, interesting QR code entry. Alex,
I'll take a look at it. I have a feeling that we have so much to do between now and NAB. The chances of me trying to learn how to dry brush between now and then is very low. So I think that, but I'm very interested in the idea of doing this maybe after NAB if the speaker idea works. What we're doing with the speaker, by the way, if you're watching, is that we have the speaker's gone, but my son is printing a holder for it. And he actually made a lot of progress while I was gone. But eventually what we're doing is we're working on having this be a monitor. This will be for NAB next week, or in 2 weeks, or a week and a half. You'll be able to see the Zoom panelists on this screen, and there'll be a speaker up here or down below. We'll take a look at that. But basically that will allow the speakers to the panelists to talk directly to people on the floor. And we're going to have an IFB for that person, but if any reason that doesn't work, we want to be able to have a speaker that's available to this. So we'll have an FX6 here. We'll have these Vislink two-way transmitters so that we can talk to that is taking it right out of Zoom. So this will be like a mobile Zoom unit. And that's what we're trying to do with the speaker. And there's a big Anker logo on the front of it. I went to grab it, and while I was gone, I was in Dallas yesterday. While I was gone, my son took it because I think he's building one that actually he printed one that will actually go straight onto the bars, which will be kind of cool. So stay tuned.
There you go. Courtney wanted to get on this.
I was just going to say I used to do a lot of television commercials, so we used to always have to remove logos from things to be in the commercials, and we used to use triple-aught steel wool to carefully remove the silk screen stuff on top. Do not use that in this situation, because the little pieces of steel wool will be attracted to the magnet in the speaker and be sucked into the. Do not use steel wool to try.
Oh, that's not good. Wisdom passed along today. Yes. No steel wool on your speaker grills, please. Let's go on to the next question.
From Jeff V. Lee, Henderson, Texas, returns with another question. Regarding chroma key layers, how much better is the Ultimatte versus the ATEM built-in keyer? I've heard it's hard to set up and wonder if it's worth the upgrade.
Courtney.
Well, they do have a new one-touch button on the new Ultimatte 12 keyers, so that analyze your scene and generate a key for you. I don't think they have that on the ATEM. They use, since they bought Ultimatte, BlackMagic bought Ultimatte from Petro Vlahos or whoever ended up owning it before then. They use the same algorithm, so you can get the same quality, but you don't have the amount of controls over that algorithm and how it affects it, and the number of layers and the number of cameras that you can handle, and so on, the number of streams it can handle. So the hardware stuff is more controllable, and they have this one button thing if you have the interface that you can press that button and it'll analyze the screen and generate a mat for you.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, when the ATEM first came out, I was super impressed at $295, and I made a video and I detailed out how to actually use these settings, foreground, background. But you see there's only about 5 settings here, versus now with the big Ultimattes coming down with the Socially You demo here, you can see how many more controls are in this device. So you can not only get the software, the hardware device, but you can also get this panel. So all these settings are also adjustable in software. But the result, the side-by-side of what these guys are doing in the Socially You demo just blows mine away. And plus, it's 4K. So to answer your question, how much better is it? It's dramatically better. It's just like you were alluding to, the learning curve's massive. When I got my first Ultimatte and started reading through the manual, and I got the panel and I started trying to figure it out, I just couldn't do it. I needed somebody from BlackMagic to come in and actually help me. So it's to that level. So be aware of what you're getting into. Thankfully, there are some good tutorials and people that are willing to help out. So start watching some YouTube videos, and I put the link in the chat for those too.
There are over 100 parameters that you can set on Ultimatte, so bear that in mind.
Okay, Alex.
Yeah, my first Ultimatte was an Ultimatte 11. We got the 444 version, which cost $33,000. I still remember because of how much it hurt to buy that. But we were able to pay it off in a couple shows. But but same thing. We had a pretty large learning curve on that first one. When we got the 12, it came out, and we had a Constellation, and so we tested them head to head. And as Guy has alluded to, the results are dramatically different. So you have a lot more control with the Ultimatte. You have, and that allows you to tweak the screens and really tweak problem areas. So what I will say is that if you light really well, the difference between the two gets less and less and less. It doesn't go to zero, but if you have a perfect solid green background, and when I say perfect, I mean that there isn't that the line, if you're looking at a scope, is if the green is running across 70%, let's say across the Luma is 70%, and if you go into that you have green at 70 or 80% and red at 10 or 20% because you're doing green on green. If you do that for interviews, which is what we did a lot of, the difference between these two is still significant but not dramatic. if you have any variance in your green screen, which most people do, like 99% of the world, if they're not doing 10 or 11 hours a week of it, you just kind of do the best you can. The Ultimatte will do a much better job at giving you the tools. The reason all those tools are important is being able to tweak. Oh, I need to get a little less of this and a little bit more of that. So it's a very, very effective tool. I would recommend thinking about the 4K version or even the 8K version, but the 4K version is great. The reason for that is that these Ultimattes are running at 422, not 444, which means that when you key the background, you're keying half the resolution, which means that you can see a subtle stair step when there's a lot of contrast. So what you're better off doing is keying at 4K, scaling down to 2K, and it's not the same as 444, but it's very close to that. And so that's something to kind of take into account. Also, remember that it's all not all the keyer. If you're wondering why there's little white edges or dark edges along your edging, that's not the keyer, that is your sharpening. So you got to turn sharpening down a little bit on your camera typically to get the key that you want, and then you can put the sharpening back in if you want to.
Let's go to the next question.
From John Foltz, Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, when we tried a team project in Premiere Pro with about 10 collaborators, it performed very poorly. It was slow, confusing, and very buggy. What do the panelists use for a collaborative video editing project? Final Cut, DaVinci, others?
Alex?
I read this in small, so I was like scanning it. And when I read it, it said, we tried a team project in Premiere Pro with about 10 collaborators. And before I read any of the rest of it, I was like, well, how did that go? I was like, that's not going to work. And so anyway, and then I read it, and then I get to the next sentence, and it goes, it performed poorly. Nothing works super well right now. I think Resolve is probably the farthest along because they're spending a lot of time on it on the cloud. It's not all there yet. And so I would say that, most of these, the one editor that really does collaboration well is Avid. And that's why it's such a standard inside of Hollywood, is that you can have a lot of people working on the same project at the same time. And they do it better than anyone else at the moment. But that's one of the things, that's one of their moats, as Warren Buffett would say, that keeps them in business, just barely. It's just barely enough of a moat. But so I think Avid does that better than anyone else. I think Resolve is I wouldn't say they've solved it, but they're moving faster than everyone else. And their solution isn't just editing. It is the editing, it's the color correction, it's the effects, it's the audio. It's a very frightening thing that they're putting together that is all going to eventually feel like it's going to be edited, it's going to be collaborative. But I wouldn't say that any of these are doing a really good job of this right now. And so most of the projects we do, we find ways to hand files back and forth to each other, but we don't really try to have them all collaborate on a file. And most software does not do this well. It's just really hard to figure out. The tricky part is who has the file right now and who gets to edit it, and how does that close the file, and whose edit, if I have conflicting edits, whose edit do I take into account? And that's what makes all this stuff really complicated.
Alex is 100% right in this. In the Avid world, you have bin locking and a bunch of other techniques. The imagination is that the project and all your media files will live in the cloud, and everybody can universally just be happy because they can go up and touch whatever part of it they want, fix whatever they want, and then the final file will live up there and be done and almost nobody I ever talked to is managing to successfully do that kind of full-scale cloud collaborative editing. So they end up trying to figure out exactly what Alex is saying. Who owns the file? Where does it physically live? Is it on a server in your office? Is it on somebody's machine? And does somebody need to get into that? And how are they going to get into that? And they're going to get into it through the local area network or something from the cloud that people outside your office can get. It's just very complicated. So everybody's working toward this. We can all kind of feel that it's going to come eventually, but it is a very tricky technical process right now. And I don't know anybody who's truly happy with anything other than I can work on my little piece as long as everybody else knows I've got it locked away, and then I'm going to contribute it back to the pool, and then you can open it later, but we can't both look at it at the same time. Robert Green, your thoughts?
Alex, do you see this moving more into the cloud with AWS?
A lot of people talk about that, but without an incredible amount of bandwidth, it's really hard to get the performance that you need to make this actually happen. Latency becomes an issue. I do think that more and more people are going to do stuff in the cloud. The hard part is that there's a bunch of storage and you need a lot of power to do this. And so if you're sitting there 10 hours a day on the cloud, you'll start paying off your hardware really quickly. So I think that, it's one of those things that I think that the cloud does make sense for a lot of things. And I think you may see some collaboration, but the kind of collaboration we need now is people on their machines, interacting with those files. Again, for smaller things, I think absolutely. There's a platform called Blackbird that lets a lot of people jump on and do a lot of this stuff in the cloud. It's pretty expensive, in case you're wondering. It's like $25,000 a year or something like that. But it'll let you stream directly into it and start cutting it and having multiple people and delivering a lot of these things. But when you start talking about real projects with real resolution and you're uploading and downloading things, it's our average show is 6 to 8 terabytes. Of something that we're editing. Like, it just ends up being 6 to 8 terabytes. And that's just a lot of data to move around. And it's a lot of data to store. And it starts to add up if you leave it in the cloud too long. So I think that's the challenge.
Guy?
Yeah, I'm looking at this as a business model. My head's always in the future, because what I'm seeing in BlackMagic Cloud is the cost of that storage is tremendous. It is, if you start sliding that slider up per month, it goes from $5 up to $2,000, up to $10,000 pretty quick if you want to store a petabyte of data, versus buying a petabyte of data like we did see with Mr. Beast's system that he just installed. So what you can do when you start talking about cloud, because I have my own little, I'm calling it Cochrane Cloud over here. It's somebody else. The cloud is somebody else's hardware in a different facility. So AWS is just a bunch of computers. They're not up in the sky. They're just in a data center down the road. So what I'm doing over here is I have it so that editors can remote into this computer, and then there's a Synology NAS that they can work off. So they could be in an apartment running at 10 megabit, but we've got all the data already up here, whether that data came from the shooters out at a hotel and they upload it, or they ship a drive, and then they can have that data put here. And so we can store 240 terabytes of storage here, and they can all see that and edit it, and they can use DaVinci Resolve or whatever they want to control this. Like, this is a 24-core, $4,000 computer that's sitting here, but they can have access to this super fast storage, but they could be on a beach with cellular accessing this super fast machine. When you do it, when you actually see how easy with Parsec and Splashtop, the speed of these things, it's incredible. So the future is very bright. It's coming. Believe me. It's, once you get a taste of it, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's just really expensive to do it in somebody else's world right now. But like turning it on AWS, if you want to leave a machine on, it's $750 a month. The Mac Stadium version is $550 a month. So the reason why I got this machine is it's $700. It was $4,000. It pays itself off in 7.5 months. So you kind of start to do the math as when is it worth buying it and creating your own cloud, or sticking it in somebody else's facility that has a little bit more bandwidth than you.
Jeffrey?
And we're good. I think we just already saw that with NDI 6. This is one of the things that he was talking about that really helps, and that's remote collaboration, remote use, being able to set up. I could set up my machine here and then go out to Vegas. As long as I have the bandwidth, I can connect up into my machine, do my work from here, transfer the files onto something like a Synology, completely avoid an AWS cloud if I wanted to, and work from there. So, and of course, be a little bit more secure in the whole process. So there's a lot happening, and I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of that at NAB.
I just want to make one more thing. As an editor, I spend a lot of my week, every week, just hammering away on edits. And at a point, you start playing your edit machine like you play a piano. And when you press the key, you want the note now. You don't even want a slight delay, because if you're making 10 commands happen and it has to process them a little bit, go up to the cloud, do that, put it back down to the monitor, even a 1 second delay changes everything about your flow. And for me, the reason I'm getting the same clients back, and again, they just go, "You're so fast with this." You know, I'm with another editor and they're not like you are. And I love hearing that, because it says that the power that I've assembled in my desktop and the system that works now lets them toss ideas at me just one after another, and I can execute them and show them to them and undo them if they don't like them almost instantly. As long as it doesn't affect that, then I'm fine with any kind of cloud or distributed system or whatever. But as soon as you start eating away at that, as an editor, I start getting a little more leery of the system. So we'll see where the balance goes. Let's go to the next question.
From Zach Stahl-Smith from Chautauqua, New York. Really cool to hear from NDI. Thanks for that. Speaking of, I want to set up NDI Bridge to access my Studio NDI sources from my home computer. What network protocols do I need to be aware of?
Guy, help him out.
Sure. Just to back up a little bit, the NDI Bridge is an app, and it's basically a host, and then you have joiners. So you have people that want to control something, and you have the thing that is going to be controlled. So let's say I'm hosting from here. I would open up port 5990, so that the protocol is TCP to answer the question. There's also RUDP, but what you're doing is you're transcoding. So when you open up Bridge, you'll see that it says NDI-HX, or you could say do not transcode. You got to have a big fat pipe to do 110, 120 megabits a second. That's not going to work. But basically, the answer is TCP, open up port 5990, and there's even a little checkbox that says verify to make sure that it is transmitting. But you also need a GPU to make this work, because that transcoding this is why you're not seeing it on the Mac right now. So NDI 6, I was bummed. No NDI Bridge for Mac, because it needs an NVIDIA card, and we won't see an NVIDIA card in a Mac. So it sounds like it's just going to be a PC thing for the future.
Let's go to the next question.
David Brady from New York, New York, needed to update streamdeck firmware and loaded up the native Elgato app. Now it loads every reboot. It isn't in login items, and there is no other tick box in the app's preferences. It's got to be a Nix thing. Any idea where to look?
Courtney?
Well, if you're in Windows, you just open up the Task Manager, and you look over here in the Task Manager, you hit Startup Apps, and you go down here and you'll find Stream Deck, and you right-click on that and just click on Disable. And then next time you reboot, it will not be part of your startup routine in Windows. Those of you that are using Macintosh products can explain how to do it there.
I don't know of anybody who's doing that right now. So let's go to the next question.
Peter Moore from Auckland, New Zealand writes in, I have a non-Chinese replacement valves coming today for my Hughes and Kettner Grand Meister Deluxe 40 valve amplifier. That's tubes for you, USA peeps. I've reached on what to do. Any tips apart from the obvious when I replace them?
Yeah, not a lot of people, except for Russia, I think, manufacturing old tubes these days. Jeffrey Powers, what do you think?
Yeah, old tubes, they're very fragile. They're very susceptible to any type of damage when you especially if you put fingerprints on them. So you're making sure that you're wearing the proper gloves when you're doing that. And, simple, when you take out a tube, you rock back and forth very gently. I'm guessing that there's a little bit more strength in today's tubes than there was in 20 years ago. But there's still the same techniques apply. I know my guitarist, every time he changes the tubes in his amp, he sets it down, he puts down a cloth, he puts his gloves on, he changes them out very carefully and puts them back in, because once you break them, it doesn't work. And if you're playing and you have something happen and they break, that's even worse.
Courtney?
There used to be a lot of suppliers of Russian branded tubes that they made them. They had factories that ran for a lot longer than we did here in the USA. So I don't know where your other replacement tubes are coming from. If they're non-Chinese, they're probably coming from Russia. So they do make some good tubes, and they do have good stock. So you may be okay.
Jeffrey's comment reminds me that it's the same thing with high-intensity lamps for projectors and things like that. What kills tubes often, because they get very hot, and the same thing with amplifier tubes, the filaments in there put out a lot of heat. So if you manage to get finger grease on the surface of a tube, it heats at a different rate than the glass around it, and that will cause micro cracks, and eventually the tube will fail because of that. So the idea of white cotton gloves is something that I was always trained to in projector lamp world, and I think it's exactly the same thing. I've carried it over into tubes. So just treat them extremely carefully They are getting hard. And, the geopolitical thing with Russia is always difficult. So that is the last manufacturing place I've heard of that still goes back to those tubes that we all had in our tube amplifiers when I was young. And treat them carefully. There's going to be a point probably where it's going to be really hard to get specific tubes. Let's go to the next question.
From Aaron Cody, St. Louis, Missouri, I need to skill up quickly, a tricky word, I know, on the infrastructure aspects of live events, rigging, chain hoists, flown truss, three-phase power, etc. How should I go about this? Books, video recommendations, classes, union training?
Alex, what do you think? What's the best way to learn?
If what you're trying to do is get better at being able to talk to people who know how to do this, then I would take a look at there's some, I don't know actually what books, and you might be able to do some. I think you have to be in the union to get the union training, but there so I think those are things that you need to look at there. If you're trying to skill up quickly to do it, I would highly recommend against that. You want to hire people that have been doing this for a decade. It is. This is the most dangerous. What you're talking about is the most dangerous part of every production is the rigging, the power, all those things are things that kill people. So, it's one thing to have a bad event. It's one thing to, have a really bad event. And so you just want to be super careful of what you're talking about. But again, Courtney may be able to give you some tips on how to bring it up. But what I would highly recommend is that when you say skill up, it's really understanding how to work with others and be able to talk their language. Because most of us learn this by being in the conversations over a decade. We don't really read a lot. We're just there and we're having conversations about what it's going to take and how things are flown in and everything else. And you kind of learn how to talk to it. But we still, even if you know it well, I was just in a meeting yesterday. We were talking about rigging, rigging and, cameras, and we were putting lots of bits and pieces, and they're still bringing in, incredible experts that have 20, 30 years of experience because there's so many things that can go wrong. And when those things go wrong in this environment, people get hurt.
I will just notice there was a comment made that Chicago Flyhouse and Columbus McKeon have some seminars on this kind of thing. Courtney, what do you know?
Well, if you have a local grip company that rents equipment, that might be a good place for training classes. If you're in the union and a member of Local 728 or 80, they have mandatory classes that you must take, safety training classes administered by the Contract Services Administration. So if you just search for Contract Services Administration and go there, you can look up training, and they offer it's local training. So I don't know, they may have some online. Here's a look at their website. They do have training classes and safety training for all time, operating scissor lifts and rigging, various types of rigging. This is their facility, and it's out in Burbank. But that's where we have to take all of these classes, and we must be certified by Contract Services Administration to have taken these safety training classes to be able to work in the industry. So you might look there. They may offer some online service training for those different functions in grip or electric.
Alex, you got a quick report?
And even if you were certified, they're not going to give you anything important to do for quite some time. So you just have to know that they really want you to watch it for a while and help with things before we let you grab things that sit over top of other people.
Yeah, somebody mentioned in the comments, don't joke with trust and rigging, and exactly right. This is dangerous stuff. It's not simple. Figure out how to get an apprenticeship or something, and so you know what you're doing. This coming Monday, we're going to be covering the Total Eclipse. We've been talking about that for a while, right here at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're going to be doing a series of live inserts. We'll be on the air for an hour and a half, kind of following the path of the eclipse through there. So we'd love to have you join us for that. So starting 11 a.m. Pacific Time, here on Office Hours. And don't forget, our National Association of Broadcasters convention coverage is just about here. We're starting in 11 days. It's next Sunday, And, I'm sorry, Sunday, April 14th, we'll have a full team of folks who are going to be doing the show live from the NAB show floor. We've got all sorts of things planning. And so we're doing 2 days this week. Today, we're about to go into our second hour now. And in our second hour, we're looking in more depth at the coverage we have planned. If you want to enjoy a virtual trip to NAB and enjoy it the best way, you might want to come here and just stick around for today and especially tomorrow. Today, we're going to be looking for your suggestions. What would you like us to do at NAB? The kind of things that you want us to go see. So your suggestions are today. And then tomorrow, we're going to talk about what we've already got planned. Alex will go through kind of the setup of the show, the crew that's going to be there, the kind of things we're going to be doing. So these 2 days are really for you. We're really looking forward to this. You know, we've now covered NAB for, I think it's the last 3 years, and every year it's gotten bigger and more comprehensive. And I know there's been a lot of work that's gone into this year, so you're going to want to be around for it. We'll be right back to talk more about this. Welcome back to our discussion of our NAB coverage. We're really excited about the show this year. We've never had the kind of access we'll be having, and thank you particularly to our sponsors. Zoom has been amazing. We're going to be able to come live from the show floor.
And I want to be clear about today is really us talking about the trends. We're not talking about our booth at all until tomorrow.
Yeah, that'll be tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow is really thinking about what trends, what are the things that we think are going to be announced, what do we see coming, you know, what we're going to try to guess, and what we want to look for, at NAB. But
so
it's not
this
so
is
much
your
what we're doing as
today.
coverage. It's really just talking about NAB in general and what we think. It's the biggest show for those watching. It's the biggest show in the world when it comes to doing video production. So there are, the two big ones are IBC and NAB, and this is the one that kind of is the center of mass for most U.S. companies and most Asian companies, and IBC then of course is the center of mass for Europe. So
and if you don't know, that NAB is the National Association of Broadcasters show. It's been going on for, I think, 50, 60, 70 years. I don't know how long it's been there, but it was started out in broadcast. Now it covers anything having to relate to production. So you will see all the big camera manufacturers, grip, lighting, sound, all of that is on display literally aisle after aisle after aisle. It covers 3 or 4 halls at NAB. So we will be located in the central hall. We'll have a booth there, and so that's going to be kind of our central hub for doing this. But as Alex said, what we want to talk about now is really what you want to see us cover. So if you have any suggestions.
It's not suggestions. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure we're clear. It's really just about us talking about the trends. So we just what we see coming in NAB. So people can talk about what the real conversation today is really about us talking about what we think is going to happen at NAB. So, what do we think is going to be released? What trends should we be watching? So it's less about our coverage and more just about NAB itself. Like, what do we think is actually going to happen there? Sorry, maybe our description wasn't clear enough. So if you're what we're really, for those watching, if you've got questions or ideas of what do you think is going to be important? Less about what should we cover, but what do you think is coming? That are these big trends that we think are going to be happening right now. I think that we've seen a surprising few announcements coming out right now. So one of the things that we have, BlackMagic usually by now has done 3 live streams. So we're not sure whether BlackMagic is going to, do anything yet. I just went to their website to make sure, and there's just simply nothing. This is the watch the update, but that was a long time ago. DJI is doing, we should see this, whatever DJI is doing, this is definitely timed. With this, so this is next week. So they've got 2 live streams, and this usually tells you they're prepping for NAB. So there is some camera updates. Obviously, we can safely guess that there is going to be a Ronin update there, because we can see the Ronin there. We can see some of the controllers, possibly a new action camera. Obviously, we think that we're going to see a new drone. So Mavic 3 Pro or we'll see what they have there. So anyway, so this is what we've seen so far. Talking to folks that are there, that are going there, there's a lot of people that are really excited about the announcements. Obviously, NDI 6 came out yesterday, which we had we talked about a little earlier today with Roberto Musso, but they'll be showing more of that. And so I think that there's a lot more. But I guess that the trends I think that I know I'm looking for is AI is a big deal. Like people are going to be talking about how you can have AI generate content, how you can have AI process content, how you can have AI color your content. I think that I think we're going to probably see a lot of areas there. A lot of automation, I think, is still going to be a big deal. But I am curious what other people think about the trends that they think are going to occur today, or occurred in a week and a half. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens.
It'll be interesting. Normally, for those of us who've been there in the past on press credentials, you get a flood of indications of what companies are going to be doing. I haven't seen as much this year as I had before. It's really been kind of surprising. My mailbox is usually totally full, particularly from the big companies who have professional PR operations, and they really tell you what they're going to be promoting.
And talking to some of the companies, there won't be as much publicly shown as we thought. So, some of the companies I've talked to said there's a bunch of things that are going to be shown behind closed doors. One of the things about NAB is that a lot of things happen that you don't, there's a lot of things that are happening in hotels. There's a lot of things that happen in meeting rooms. There's a lot of things so everybody's there. And it sounds like a lot of the announcements aren't quite cooked, so a lot of them are going to be private, technology shows. So, but I'm sure that we'll see a lot of new stuff, but I think that that's something that seems to be a larger trend now, is to show folks stuff that isn't necessarily quite ready for public consumption, but they can give people a little sneak preview of what it looks like.
The other thing that was surprised me is normally there's a kind of a show theme every year. In the past, they used to say, NAB 2010 or whatever, and where this happens, and so you get a sense of where the industry was kind of going. Now, some years that was it's 3D video year this year, and it would never really come to pass. But other times you did get a sense. The Appleification of NAB that happened maybe 15, 20 years ago when the South Hall grew up and was all the digital computer companies really flooding into the video industry trade show, and we could see that as really palpable on the show floor. And then, of course, Apple left after some years, thinking that what they did in terms of their keynotes and things like that was enough marketing so they didn't have to have a booth at all. You see some old ones, the Snell broadcast and the people who are out of the broadcast industry, you see their booths getting smaller and diminishing, where the new, more robust kind of digital companies started to ascend. People like BlackMagic, who now has been, for the last many years, kind of the linchpin of that South Hall.
I was going to say that I think they're going to change the name of South Hall to the BlackMagic Hall, because it's going to be the entire half of. I have no idea. I think it's just I think that BlackMagic is only constrained in the size of their booth, is only constrained by by who else has dibs on the booth, on the booth space, because I think they would just, if anybody cancels, I think they just take the next booth. Like if I think Autodesk is butted up against them, they would just, if Autodesk said, hey, we're getting smaller, BlackMagic would be like, yeah, I'll take that. Take it. Yeah, I'll take, I'll take a little bit more. I mean, it's the expanse of that is it's been crazy to watch BlackMagic grow. I've watched, I've been going to NAB now for 30 years. I've watched BlackMagic grow from I don't know if it was ever a 10 by 10 booth, but it was a really small booth. It was like a 20 by 20 or something, to the behemoth that it is now.
And everybody used to line up at Central Hall or North Hall. Now, then in the years when those companies, Apple and other people, the kind of the young guns of the industry, everybody would line up in that big pad outside of South Hall, which is the only one that's 2 stories. And the bottom floor of the South Hall used to be the place to be. And there would be 3,000, 4,000, 7,000 people in line to break in right past that original Apple. That's now where BlackMagic is.
Funny because I admit, because I often have an exhibitor pass, I always thought it was funny from the outside, because you'd be on the inside of it doing something and you're like, they're not going anywhere. Nobody's going anywhere. You don't have to run, through the thing. It's not. I was like, I don't quite understand that process, but anyway, I think it's going to be, and then usually, really what BlackMagic plans to release, because it's always on the side of the buildings. So there's they generally buy up almost all the real estate on the convention halls. We'll get some shots for you of those, but usually the day before you go, oh, okay, here's where we're going here. But it is interesting. I think that it'll be interesting to see where Sony goes. I will say that if you're going to NAB, the Sony wall, I don't know if they're going to show it this year or not, but in the last couple of years, Sony's had this 8K wall that's 8K HDR, 120 frames a second footage. And if you don't believe in 120 frame 8K, you just got to go over and look at the wall. Just watch it for half an hour. Just sit there and bring it all in. Just trying to make sure you can still see the edges, because you'll get disoriented, because it's the craziest footage I've seen.
That is beautiful. They used to have the camera array at the Sony booth, so literally from their broadcast cameras that are doing the big shows in New York and Los Angeles, you could get your hands on those, and then you just step down the line all the way down to very small cameras, the kind that they usually had another area for the really handy cam kind of things, but at least anything that was broadcast adjacent.
And the thing that I have not been able to get my hands on has been the LR1. So the Sony LR1 is something that I'm really interested in, because it's basically it's slightly larger than the sensor. It's a full frame sensor camera that is webcam size, and the rumor is that it's doing really well. The
other fun thing about that, I just mentioned that they would do these dioramas where they would have live actors and perfectly lit in scenes. And so for Sony and Panasonic and JVC and the other camera companies, they would have these set pieces, and then you could actually operate the cameras and shoot the people that they had there. They had maybe half a dozen or more models inside the ring of cameras. So that was always really fun to do. And then for the audio booth, same kind of thing. This is where you can actually get a hold of the products from Lectrosonics and Sony and everything else in their audio systems, and talk to engineering people and the booth experts who are trained to give you the answers. So that was, when Alex says it's great to do virtual, but there is something about the live hands-on. This is very much what we're talking about. To go and talk to somebody, ask real-time questions, get 5 minutes with a product manager, or even just the booth people who are highly trained to be able to do that job and know what they're talking about. So you can really get a lot of data in a two-way conversation almost instantly there in a way that you can't do it anyplace else. And that's what we're going to try to bring you as we go examine this.
What are you going to look for, Courtney?
Well, I'd like to see the BlackMagic booth and look for new little boxes, but I always like to do that because they always the prices always come down right at NAB, because they'll introduce some new boxes, and the old boxes that are long of tooth, they knock $100 off. I noticed that I don't know what our coverage is going to be, but they've moved on the West Hall this year is where they're putting what they call Connect, which is all their distribution deliveries. So it may be any type of remote operations, or like we do, where we're bringing in people from all over the world over, and maybe that's where NDI's booth will be.
I'm pretty sure that's where all the stuff that we used to walk past and not look at in the South Hall.
Well, you can see radio is this little tiny thing
over there. Oh man! The hard part is that the West Hall is so pretty. It's just that it's so far away.
Yeah.
So it's so you you're committing like the afternoon. Like if you go to NAB, you have to kind of commit the afternoon. Like I'm going over to the West Hall. I'm going to go over there, and then I'm going to, I set up all my meetings in the West Hall in one day. Like, I'm going to go over there.
You know that you can just take a Tesla. You just walk right out of the central hall, down the escalator, get in a Tesla, and it'll drive you all the way to the West Hall, and you pop back up right there.
Really?
It's 5 minutes. It's not
sometimes
long at all.
The line can be a little iffy, though. So sometimes it takes a while to get into a Tesla. The other thing is there's a bridge. There's a kind of a skyway over Paradise Boulevard that takes you from the edge of
the 30-minute walk.
Yeah.
That's what he's talking about.
That's a slog, as we say.
Hey, I used to stay at the Riviera, so I had to take that walk 3 or 4 times a day every day, so I'm real used to it.
One thing I was going to mention is my favorite thing to do at the BlackMagic booth is when I have a piece of BlackMagic gear that I wish did something, that it doesn't do, like autofocus, is to find the product manager for that product. And you do that by going up, and if it's just a marketing guy who's handling, questions and demoing the stuff in the booth, you ask him a really complex question about that. Does this support 12-bit interconnection for remote? And ask him some unique question that the marketing person's not going to know the answer to, and he'll go, "Well, I don't know, but I think Bill is the product manager. He can answer that question for you. So then you get the product manager, and then you hammer them for all the stuff that your PO really doesn't do that you wish it did. And if they get enough requests like that, they will add that.
The Grant's oftentimes on the floor, and the thing I'll warn you about with Grant that I've learned over time is that if you ask him, think of this as the strike zone, and if you ask for things in the strike zone of he understands what that is, he's going to sit there and talk to you about it and get real interested. Like I've learned that he gets real interested and he'll talk to you. He'll start asking you a bunch of questions about it and everything else. That means you're in the strike zone. That means it's something he's thinking about and you're in there. If you get a little over on the edge here, he'll kind of think, oh yeah, I'll think about that. And he might think about it. Get out of the strike zone and he's not really listening to you anymore. so anyway, just so you know, like he's just like, okay, I'm not working on that. And so he has a very strong opinion, and his opinion is done pretty well. But he, that's what he's like, the Steve Jobs of the video, the video world. And but if you get out of that, so you'll know that you're in the strike zone because he'll start asking you lots of questions. If he doesn't ask you lots of questions, he's trying to close the conversation down. You should just walk away. Like just say,
one of the fun things used to be they do a presser the first day. So Monday morning, Grant would come in an hour before, and the BlackMagic team, and if you had a press pass, you could go in and sit behind their set in a little set of rows, and they do the whole presentation for you before the show, and then everybody would run out and try to get connection.
And there's a lot of great breakfasts that are kind of floating around. AJA does a breakfast, and they don't do it on the floor. They I think ASG does one. There's a bunch of them that if you're in press, you tend to get some of those invitations. But
there'll be a lot of things to see. The other thing, and we just briefly covered it, and I'll just momentarily mention it. Alex mentioned it too. The evenings and their parties, there are things that if you can get an invitation in, there are a lot of meetings in hotel suites and things like that. And if you've been a loyal user of a particular product, and if you've been active on their forums and things like that, sometimes that's enough to get you an invitation to one of these kind of, not on the convention floor or premises, but in a hotel nearby. And those can be really interesting in terms of the back and forth you'll have with the product manager or the designer or the engineer. It's a whole week solid with a focus on the video industry, the audio industry, and everything else.
Okay, Nigel, I'm curious what a person like you is looking for.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting, so last year was my first NAB, and of course within these shows there are multiple different shows. You talked about some of them. I always find the fun one is the component people. Go around, look at all the little components that people are selling. What I think is interesting is I think I started to see what I think is going to become a bifurcation of this show, that there are lots of professional TV and radio and the professional side of the business, which I think is what NAB has always been. What is emerging is the semi-professional creator side of the business, where you can sell 10 fancy cameras, you can sell 1,000 semi-fancy cameras. And so I think what will be interesting, what I'm looking for is, how is that side of the business, maybe the business that is more interesting to people like me, who don't have $1 million to spend, but have a couple of $1,000 to spend, but there's a lot more of us. How are they going to start dealing with that? And when does that become a more dominant message for some of them? And within that, just one more point, within that, the next hurdle, whether it's needed or not, is 4K. And when do they start saying, the ATEM minis, here's the 4K version, not because necessarily we need it, but because they can sell it?
Well, just recently they did the Sunday day, and I think that's right to what you're talking about. It used to be that NAB was Monday through Thursday, but they opened up for Sunday, and I suspect that part of that was to get exactly the kind of discussions going that you're talking about, Nigel, because that really opens it up more to the public. It's not during the business week. It's on a weekend. So the smaller tech, the things that are more prosumer and above oriented, I think we're going to see quite a lot of focus on that on Sunday. I'm really looking forward to seeing what's changed about that. Robert Green, you had some thoughts?
For where I work in my world is EVS, so I'm curious about how the AI tools that they are going to be demoing look and how practical they are. They've been using extra motion, which it will take any camera and turn a replay into a super slow-mo by sending it out to the web and returning it back. And I think they've been using that in sports for some time. And the newer AI things we were talking about are AI-driven effects like deblurring, auto-cropping, and shallow depth of field.
Things that have come from the camera side and the rest of that. I will note that I just saw the tagline. It's now this year, it's where content comes to life. So they don't even mention TV or broadcast anymore. Now they're kind of psychologically expanding out into this idea of content, which is everywhere, includes the internet and everything else. Alex, you had another follow-up?
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see some of that. I mean, I've been amazed at using just Topaz Photo and Topaz Video AI of just doing conversions. I've been doing some conversions from 24 to 60 or 24 to 5994 or whatever in Topaz Video. Now, it does take days to do a full length conversion, but it is, it's that hints towards what we may be looking at there. There is a very large creator space that's happening upstairs in the South Hall. They have a very large space there that they're going to be having lots of discussions that, to your point, are more open to those things. I am interested in some of the stuff that Robert was talking about related to being able to add frames is a big deal for the slow motion. Also, I think you're going to see, Sony and others have been promoting this idea of we've got multiple cameras on a field, and we're going to convert that to 3D characters, 3D, and there's been a mixture of that. At first, they started digitizing it, but where we've seen some things hinted at and shown in some of the ESPN Monday stuff with the second screen experience is basically create game characters that are the different players. And by the way, for a lot of things like Madden football and everything else, they have those players like all digitized. And so but what they can do is then use the data and a lot of heavy processing to figure out the motions of everything in real time or near real time in replays. And so I think I'm really interested to see what that looks like. I think that we're going to see another push towards low light. A lot of folks are, low light is something that is always we can't get enough of. The real leader in broadcast low light is Canon, the ME20, and so it'll be interesting to see if there's a military grade version called an X27. I can't remember who makes it, but but they're very similar in these and it'll be interesting to see if anyone goes more towards that low light. The other thing that I think we have to keep looking at is we're going to see a resurgence in stereo because of Apple's Vision Pro. Stereo and Stereo 180 specifically, I think, is going to be something that we'll probably see more camera systems related to again. It comes around every 20 or 30 years. I just got Dial M for Murder for my Vision Pro. That was shot in actual stereo by Hitchcock. I don't know, in the 50s, so this resurgence happens every, they're like, oh, this is the next time, because we all know that it looks really cool. You just can't quite figure out how to get it off the ground. So we're going to, I expect us to see some 180 examples and stereo 180 examples as people start to get that, whether it goes anywhere or not, I don't know. But I have to admit that I downloaded some videos for my flight to my Apple Vision Pro. By the way, if you're wondering, Apple Vision Pro on a plane is transformational. So it worked well. But I chose to download the 2D versions because I was like, oh, I don't really feel like watching 3D. So that's a problem. That's a problem when who does 3D goes, I'd rather just watch the 2D version. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with that as well.
Courtney, you had another thought?
Yeah. House of Wax was also shot in 3D, Alex. You should order that for your Vision Pro. I'll be interested to see, because Red always has a booth kind of near BlackMagic there in the South Hall. And now that they're owned by Nikon, I'd like to see how Nikon is going to, bring Red into their universe or bring Nikon into the Red universe and see what the amalgam of those two things are going to do. And I also, that gets very little play is JVC, and JVC has been making a bunch of cameras like this one here that supports, it's a camcorder, and you see new stringers and small stations using this, and it supports NDI HX. It has direct connectivity. You see the antennas on there. It'll stream directly to YouTube Live or Facebook from that camcorder.
I think that the problem with the JVC has with a lot of us that watch it is they're so good at adding all these features, and they just will not invest in their chips. So the thing is that the sensors in the JVC and the core video processing is always problematic for us, and it's never as good as everything else that we're using. And so but they keep on, instead of, and I feel like they must just not be very good at chips because they keep on investing in everything else the camera can do, except giving us a larger sensor that's more that does a better job and everything else. And I guess it's good for just in time or disposable content, but it's not really, like, I think that's where they get kind of dinged, is that they don't give us a great chip. And so you kind of look at it like, well, it looks fine, but it's, they give you all the features that you want. You're absolutely right that you always go to JVC to see what a camera could do. And then you just go, I wish it had a Sony chip in it.
Yeah. Well, usually they're 3-chip, a lot of times they're 3-chip. So they'll give you a bigger depth of field. They won't give you that cinematic look. They're designed for doing documentaries or sports or something where you need a larger depth of field. So you're right. They don't have the large sensors on any of them,
and they're not very sensitive sensors either. I mean, like our experience with them have always been that they're just not at the same quality. And I just feel like if they fix that, all the other features in the JVC cameras are outrageously good. And it's just like, you just fix the actual image that's going through all those features. It would be amazing.
So we have a bunch of questions in. So Robert, what do we got first?
First, we have from Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri. There hasn't been a new $3,000 to $5,000 professional camcorder in a while. Panasonic CX350, Canon XF605, Sony Z190 are all fairly long in the tooth. Will we see something new in this space at NAB, or am I destined to wait until I can afford an Ursa Broadcast G2?
What do you think, Alex?
It's a market that has not done super well in the last couple of years, and so they're definitely out there. But so many people that were creators that originally got into those, this is where a lot of people. I had a DBX100B, I think, and I had XL1s, and we had the EX1s and EX3s. These were all stuff that in the 15 years ago and 10 years up to about 10 years ago, a lot of us were using for a lot of coverage, and they were really that was like the golden era of the small camcorder, the sub $10,000 camcorder that could do all these things. And the real challenge is that Red, Canon, Sony, BlackMagic all move these interchangeable lens systems that have large sensors into that market. And it has been, and as Bill alluded to with the creator market, creators very much lean towards, Super 35 is table stakes for most creators, or their phone. So the problem is that you get squeezed between, if I'm not going to be using a large sensor, I'm going to move to my phone because the phones are so good now. And so I think that the camcorders have gotten themselves kind of crammed between this larger sensor creator community and this mobile creator community. And I think that it's just very difficult for them to, they haven't done as well as many of the other verticals in the market.
I was thinking exactly the same thing. The phones on the low end are really squeezing up. And that's one of the things I'm looking for at NAB this year is how do we see phone rigs and things like that for shooting on the floor? Or are they keeping away from that and keeping the valley between those two users distinct? Guy?
Yeah, I think the market has spoken, and users just aren't buying those cameras like they used to. The BlackMagic really, with the pocket line, really put a damper in some of those sales. The Canon, the JVC, all those guys. What I see in the rental market is the FX6 with the 24-105 is a popular choice. If you need longer glass, you can just get another lens and pop it in there. So there's the Canon C500 line. So there are these larger sensor cameras. They just need with interchangeable lens systems. They just need to cost. You need to raise your budget from the $3,000 to $5,000 to this model here, as we just saw, is $7,000, and you might just want to rent. Some of these things you don't need to own them; you can just rent them. So, depending on how much you're going to be working the camera, will determine if you want to put that kind of money, or if you need multiple cameras. That kind of is the deciding factor. If you need 2 for a sporting type event, or 3 or 4 or 5, and then a lot of people, I'm just seeing robos. I'm seeing PTZs are stealing the show, because I can operate 4 or 5 cameras, and with AI now, I can just say, all right, here's my bounding box. Even with a FX6, with active track, with a Ronin, you can just bounding box around the person and just say, go, and it'll just bzz, 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 bzz. So I think automation's taken away some of what we used to do with people.
Alex, you want to get back in?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that really nailed a lot of these cameras also was when BlackMagic released something that tied into a switcher and you could shade the cameras remotely. There were so many live productions that were small live productions, not the big ones, but the small live productions suddenly had a tool that we were always struggling with, is how do we control those cameras remotely? And I think that just went like wildfire through a lot of productions, is being able to shade everything remotely and control those cameras to some degree from the switchers. And we have to realize that, BlackMagic, we can talk about, they sold hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these minis. There's a lot of people with a lot of hardware out there. It's the scale to the next switcher is, probably at least 100 to 1. And so that really put a damper on a lot of this, because if you're doing live, you wanted to do it. And to Guy's point, I've been using PTZs now for 10 years, and we started buying them, and I think that's the other. We talked about global shutter and autofocus, but the real blind spot for BlackMagic that just feels like you're just like, what are you guys doing over there, is the lack of a PTZ. And I think that because this, I can tell you, we're using in our booth Sony FR7. Sony's sending us those to borrow, not to keep. But we'll have a bunch of FR7s there, and it just really is going to change the look of what we're doing, And so we've got Sony's lent us FX6s and FR7s for the show. So the mobile rigs will be on FX6s, but the PTZs that we need for the booth are going to be right there. And it's really, I've been using a lot of those for a lot of the shows that I do commercially, and it just really is a game changer to have a full frame sensor with a PTZ. So I do think that we're going to see, I think, more PTZs. But I can't believe every year you go, BlackMagic's going to release a PTZ and, ruin it for everyone, but then they don't. So you're just like, okay.
Next question.
From Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington, Frame.io speculation. And Guy pulls a quote from Frame.io, join our biggest announcement yet.
Everybody's wondering, what are they going to say? Alex, you want to weigh in?
I have no idea what they're going to say, but I know that Emery tends to keep his. I've known Emery for a long time, and he tends to keep his cards very close to his chest. So if he's saying that this is the biggest thing, it's probably going to be a lot. My guess is a very tightly wound integration with Adobe products. I think that I don't think they're going to let go of the. They're still going to support Resolve, and they're still going to support Final Cut, and they're still going to do all the support they have right now. But I think that at some point you had to get to a point where Adobe bought it, and I think that having it totally tied into the Adobe ecosystem is going to make a lot of sense for Frame. I think that also I would be surprised if we don't see support for USDZ, the ability to do a lot of those kinds of 3D solutions and potentially even stereo solutions. So I think that like being able to use it in Apple Vision Pro for review. Those are the kind of things that I think that are potentials for what they're doing.
Yeah, it's been interesting since Michael Cioni left them. I'm really interested in what they announced this year and what the direction seems to be.
And that'll happen next week, right? I think that's next. Yeah. That's a launch next week. So we'll get to talk about it before we get to the show.
Yeah. Let's go to the next question.
From Alex 4D Goldner, London, UK, will anyone announce collaboration and post-production that has moved on from ancient Avid-style bin locking, as currently available in Resolve and Premiere? Web-based video review services don't count.
Alex, what do you think?
Probably not. It's a really complicated problem. When you talk to folks that work on this, figuring out who saved what when is really, unless you're all screen sharing the same thing or doing something else, it's really hard to have multi-tenancy and have it be stable. This is the problem that Apple's had for a long time. It has worked when it's a single document, and even in Google has figured it out for smaller things, but video is a lot more complicated than sheets.
Courtney?
And security is a horrible thing to deal with in these remote collaboration type post-production systems, because the studios are so paranoid that, first answer print or something, something that's used for mixing is going to sneak out and into the internet world before the film is released, and kind of blow their introduction and their marketing. Security has to be number one, and controlling all of those access and who has the ability to download anything or see anything, it gets to be a nightmare. And we'll see what they do to improve that. COVID kind of forced everyone into that, and I think they've enhanced security quite a bit. But I'm not sure how they're going to handle all this remote collaboration and still keep the wraps on stuff so that early versions of a movie don't come out 4 weeks before they premiere it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been a Final Cut editor for so long, and it's built on a platform, the SQL database, that's kind of its keyword system and the rest of that. And I always thought back when I first got a hold of it, wow, someday they're going to plug this in and I'll be able to reach into my software and talk to everything. And I was talking to somebody a long time ago, and they said, don't hold your breath for that, for exactly this reason. If you open up those ports to the outside world so that you can do it, there's a good chance that the hackers will figure out how to get into your systems and things like that. And I remember when Frame 10 years ago, one of their first big rounds of funding, they got a couple $100 million, I think, and it was a lot of that chunk went into security plumbing inside of that for exactly the reason you're talking about. Particularly the studios, they don't want you having any kind of a system that can access the edit-in process that is anything other than a completely walled garden, so that nobody can potentially steal their content and get it out before the release of movies. So it's a complicated thing, no question about that. Let's go to the next question.
From David Brady, New York, the broadcast industry can be conservative in regarding to adopting change. How will AI pan out into the industry?
The crystal ball time, Alex.
All of it. Like it's going to be, I think we're going to see AI touching a lot of things. And again, I think it's not so much touching the core aspects of what we do, but really touching on making a lot of our jobs easier, making things more fluid, making, I'm working on a concept for a music video that we might get to shoot and show you us shooting it over the summer. And what I really want to do is, I've been struggling getting Mid-Journey, for instance, to build those slides. But if you start to look at that's what we're going to be able to do is, like, for instance, one of the things you'll see is me being able to sketch out a bunch of ideas and say, this is the character, and this is what the character's doing, and then they just fill it all in, like this is, and then have consistency and so on and so forth. But being able to add 3D models, but then being able to, as Guy was talking about, tracking things, just like, I just need you to, create good frames of these folks, and be able to give it guidance, as Robert talked about, being able to up-res, add frames, add these other things, so we're going to see so many places where AI just makes everything, just smooths out everything out. And what it really does is it empowers the creator, who is not necessarily a technician, to express their ideas. And I think that's one of the themes you're going to see, is that I can think of something and I can just have it. I don't need to be a technician to get that done. I can say, I just want this to be cleaner. I want to get rid of all the pops. I want to make it bigger. I want to, draw this thing. I want it to be, and it's still not taking away from the creation process, but it is a real threat to technicians who, aren't necessarily as creative, but are, but know how to hit the buttons really well. And that's still going to be valuable for some time. But I think that as we keep on moving forward, what you're going to see is AI starting to fill that in, where creators are able to express the ideas very, very fast. And they're not going to have a lot of friction in between their ideas and pixels on glass. So I think that's going to be a really, really interesting. And I think we're going to see the beginnings of that, but that's going to keep on getting bigger every single year.
Yeah, I would refer back to what Michael Cioni said when he was on this show 6 weeks ago or something like that. He broke it down into utility AI, the kind of things we're talking about now, where AI does a lot of the heavy lifting and process, and generative AI that is more focused on creating things inside there. And he said, I think my understanding was that the first is going to swamp everything, and we're going to see it in touching everything we do, literally, from script writing all the way through post-production. The generative stuff will be a little bit slower because it's harder to get that to follow your will, at least a little bit. That's my experience so far. But it's all going to be developing, and hopefully we'll get a sense of where the production industry is going in that direction by going to NAB. Let's get to the next question.
From JJ McKenna, San Rafael, California, We've been hearing don't buy anything until NAB for the past few weeks. Is there perhaps one area that folks should hang around for particularly exciting gear to purchase?
Nigel, what do you think?
Well, you typically can't purchase gear at these shows, although B&H stand often has some very interesting offers that they'll fulfill after the show, and who doesn't want to spend time at B&H? I think if there was a product set that would cause me serious concern, wallet-wise, it would be a move to 4K with HDMI and not SDI. And I think that, I don't know anyone's going to do it, but the jump to SDI seems like an unnecessary jump for me. So if we could do it with HDMI, I think that would start to become pretty interesting. Also, I'll tell you that about 4 weeks ago, Audinate sent me a market research thing. And in a moment of quietness, I did it. And they emailed me last week to say I had won a free Avio adapter for filling in the survey. So I don't know whether I'm the only person that filled in the survey. But, you know, one always does see these, give us your business card, you could chance to win. You know, I'm always tempted to have a go.
Courtney.
Yeah, like Nigel said, you don't really the new products that are announced at NAB are almost never for sale. There are very few companies like Apple that keep it a complete secret till they announce it and they say, and you can order it now. But one thing you can do is the reason you don't buy until NAB is because when they announce a new product, even though that new product may not be available for 3 or 4 months, or in BlackMagic's case, not till next NAB, when they announce a new product, a lot of times it'll start shipping right before the next NAB, just so that they can not have people show up in the booth and say, hey, you showed this last year and I still can't get it. But anyway, what they will do, a lot of manufacturers, when they come up with a new product, it's going to obsolete or make some of their existing line less valuable. So they will drop the prices on all of that. So if you're thinking about getting something that's available now, wait till NAB, because the prices may drop after they announce a new product in the same line as the one that you're looking at.
Alex.
Yeah, the one thing I would suggest if you actually go to NAB is there's B&H has these little candies that you can only get at the store. You can only get them at the store except for NAB and when they have booths somewhere. It's so good. Anyway, I don't know what it is about them, but I'm walking around this. I get to the B&H booth and I'm usually beaten and I'm just tired. And I'm like, I just need a little sugar. And there it is.
I think
it's like a little oasis. It's like a little candy oasis.
The owners of B&H must have a dental practice somewhere.
Exactly. I don't know how much that candy they buy. Anyway, so I think that beyond the candy at the B&H booth, I think that I'm really, looking for PTZs. I'm looking for rigs for mobile, and I'm looking for what I'm going to, shooting with Apple Vision Pro. So that's, not shooting with it, but shooting for it. So those are the big things that I'm looking at. And of course, tracking AI and anything else that surprises me, because that's a big thing with NAB is you just don't know. You don't know. So we're just going to get there and see what we find.
Guy?
Yeah, it all comes down to what you're into. You're going to see things, you're going to hear things audio-wise. Electrosonics already announced a new transmitter, the DSSM. Lighting-wise, you're going to see better battery pack. So once you hit the floor and you start to see how other people are doing things, and you're like, oh man, I used to have to do this or that or buy this or buy that. And this innovation can be lighter, faster, more capacity. So those are the things that you start to be like, ADHD squirrel, you just walking down the aisles, you just see a tripod and you're like, oh, let me try that out. And you feel the smoothness and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is what it's all about. Like now I see how these floating like images. So a $500 tripod versus a $5,000 tripod, you start to get a feel for what these things are. And then post-production, the storage, 10 gigabit, 25 gigabit, asking these engineers or these product marketing managers these questions like, why would you buy this switch and why would you route that to that? It's a wonderful place to be to walk and just start to ask questions that you wouldn't ask on YouTube in a comment, because you see it there, you feel it there, you see how bright something is, and it's just so engaging to go. And I hope that we can, in this show, be able to give that gift back to the online audience. So I'm excited to see what the guys Trumpsing, how do you say that, across the floor, stop and listen to us that are on this side, because I'll be here in this studio and hopefully be able to give a little direction as to what what people in the chat are saying and what we want to see, because that to me is the exciting part, is bringing this to the folks that can't make it. There'll be 120, 130,000 people there. But what about us? What about us that aren't flying?
Just off the top of my head, though, we should do in after hours a little swag hunt, right? Everybody get together at the tail end of the door. And what was the best swag you picked up on the show floor this year? There are so many little tchotchkes and things that the booths hand out for free to people. So we'll see. Let's go to the next question.
From Kyle Ham in Chicago, Illinois, will there be any releases of tech, any release or tech that will integrate with Apple Vision Pro?
Nigel, what do you think?
I suspect it's still a bit early to see a product. You might see proof of concepts. I think the most interesting thing about Apple Vision Pro is amongst the circles that I move in, there's still quite a lot of cynicism about it. Some of it, I think, is slightly naive, 3D, here we come again. But some of it is, I think, a misunderstanding of the product. I was involved in quite a long thread on another place around, well, it's not really solving a customer problem. And I'm like, but it's an MVP and they're trying to test the technology. And, well, it's an expensive. So there's a lot of ignorance. So I think it will be interesting to see how much it sneaks into the conversation and how much it's used as an example, and whether it's just something people talk about, or whether people are going to take the step of starting to envision a world with it in, and how much they're willing to put a step forward. I suspect it's still very controversial in a lot of places, but there'll be some that will start to take the advantage, and I think it'll be interesting to see how formal they will be with that.
Alex?
The big thing is that I think that what most people know is that Apple is not they're not like a lot of other companies that will jump into something and then go, oh, that didn't really turn out. Like in a year or two later, it's gone. The chances of them stopping working on the Apple Vision Pro over the next decade is almost zero. And so I think that trust that's been built, really has an opportunity to pay off a lot, in people starting to develop stuff. You want to get on the ground floor because they're probably going to sell a lot more of these, not at this price, but at the next price. And I think that, so I think that gives a longer runway for a lot of folks to look at, well, I want to show off what I'm doing first. And so I do think that we may see some camera systems. I think we may see more. I think we will see some ambisonic systems, some more surround. I think that it'll be interesting to see what Dolby is going to release this year, or what they're going to talk about at least. So I think that those are places that we'll also want to take a look at. But I think that that's going to be what I'm mostly looking for in the Apple Vision Pro, though, is the potential of more camera systems for it, because that's a really hard problem to solve.
Guy?
Yeah, this morning I saw an image of something called the Vroom app, VROOM. It's in test flight right now, but it was a system where you could, using the Apple Vision Pro, you could see basically the map in a AR space. So I'm looking forward to this 5 windows, or pick your windows, in-car driver, whatever the regular show would be, but plus the map of the cars moving around on your floor. That's pretty wild. So I'm looking forward to seeing stuff like that, technology that we haven't seen before. The one thing that, speaking of Michael Cioni, he did show is a focus puller, pulling focus. I'll put a link to this, but he's already asking, can Apple Vision Pro change filmmaking forever? And he has this 20-minute video of somebody pulling focus with the Apple Vision Pro and how revolutionary it is. So that's something we might see on the floor, is people like Preston or somebody who has these systems, Tilta, and you'll see people walking around with those, in addition to Alex probably walking around with his.
I don't know why, but I'm thinking back to I used to own a titanium MacBook Pro, the original titanium Tybook. And I just think about there to the last Air I just bought, the MacBook Air that's in my voice booth. And the distance between those two products is astronomical. The manufacturing ability, the capability, the speed, the processing, they're just orders of magnitude in two different universes. So if this follows this pattern, and we don't know that it will, but if it does, there may be loops or glasses or whatever down the road that bring some or maybe even all of these capabilities to us, and that could be a truly transformative thing. You never know what's going to really catch on and transform everything, but it's possible. A lot of people have visual needs. A lot of people wear glasses. And if you could put some of this tech in something that really is affordable enough so that universally people, the same way they pay, $300 or $400 for a pair of glasses, that's not unusual these days at the top end of the market. If it can bring the world to you in terms of data and imagery and the rest, that would be pretty transformative in the long run. Let's go to the next question.
From Alex 4D Goldner in London, will anyone announce 3D video workflows for Apple Vision Pro, both for flat stereo in a frame and for 180-degree immersive video? If not, what would it mean?
Alex, what do you think?
I don't think it means anything yet. I mean, I think that next year we'd be worried about it if we don't see any progress here. But I think that we're still pre-WWDC. I think that we're going to see more and more rolled out. And I think that Apple's real focus, WWDC and then the fall event in September, I think are going to be the two that you probably see a lot of push of new technologies. So I think the summer is going to be really where the push is. So I think that you'd be a little ahead right now to see a lot yet. So, but hopefully we might see a handful of cameras that are doing something, or a handful of systems that are starting to go down that path.
Next question.
From David Brady, New York, LED display technology is going to be big. Who are some of the leaders in this space worth seeing? Planar, Niotti, Samsung, etc.
Courtney, what do you think?
I just saw a video on YouTube from a company called Ventana that has this new system for doing video walls with these panels up to a 6K display, and they attach via magnets. And all the interconnected, there's no wiring or interconnectivity between the panels, and that you can build a display as large as you want. And it allows you to just pop them on using the magnets, and they have like pogo pins that connect all the data, and it's all handled inside each of the panels itself. All the processing is handled inside the panels itself, and it has a 0.9, I think, dot pitch on it. So it's micro LED and can handle up to 6K images. So that's what's interesting to come. I don't know what the pricing is, though. That's the big question.
And every NAB went big display things. Increasing displays have always been a big thing that I've noticed when I'm there. You get to see the latest technology in terms of display. Alex?
Yeah, I think that we're definitely seeing a rush to much smaller LEDs, or much smaller mills. So what we used to build stuff at 2.6, 3.2, that kind of thing, is now getting into the 1.5s, the 0.9s, and that really has changed what you can do in a virtual set. So something that's behind someone when you have a much smaller pitch. So I think we're going to see more smaller pitches. I think that how they mount and how they integrate, something Courtney talked about, is something that's been a challenge. I think View is also one that we had View on our show, VU, and they're going to be probably on the show showing some stuff off as well. So I think that there's a lot of different places where we'll see this. I mean, I have a dream someday that our booth will, instead of having, we have a great background that it's going to be there, but it's very simple. It would be great to have a big LED wall. So we'll see where that goes in the future.
Next question.
From Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand, BMD continues their support for the three platforms, Linux, Mac, and Windows with Resolve. I've GPU-accelerated Resolve, Unreal Engine, etc. on Linux. My Ryzen PC was built December of 2019. I'm on it now. Thoughts about Linux?
Alex?
I just don't see it in production. It's in large production, but in a day-to-day production, you just don't see Linux very often anymore. So it is in a very large production, or folks that are a little bit more geek vertical, you'll see a Linux build of things. But usually it feels like at least the BlackMagic stuff is a little behind there because it's just it's less than 1% of their market, I'm sure.
Courtney?
I'll tell you where you do see a lot of Linux is in 3D animation. Disney, they're all running on Linux boxes over there, cranking out those feature films. So there's a lot of under-the-radar Linux as far as 3D production goes. So they're not going away anytime soon.
Next question.
From Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana, is there anything helpful for us in the new 5G broadcasting technology? It's not one phone to one phone, but one source to many phones. Broadcasting again, not broad-catching. And there's a link to tvtechnology.com.
Yeah, 5G. Alex, what's your current take?
Generally, as a consumer technology, I think 5G is a complete bust. I think that it was a massive waste of money, and it has been a total failure. For production, 5G is pretty cool. so being able to put that much bandwidth in, if you're a better cell to cell jump, a much higher bandwidth, much lower latency, all those things work really well for production. So if the only thing we benefit from is that they put all that money into it because they thought it'd be a bigger consumer impact. This is actually interesting, of being able to potentially broadcast to a lot of phones that have 5G and being able to have that low latency. So, again, in the production vertical, I think that 5G is super interesting. I think that in the general vertical, it's less so.
Courtney?
Yeah, the problem with 5G is they've changed the terminology. First 5G was millimeter wave, so it was ultra high frequency. And so it didn't travel very well, which is what, as Alex said, gave it such a bad reputation, because it wouldn't penetrate walls. It only goes, a quarter of a mile at best. So for broadcasting, it wasn't very good. For point to point, it was great if you had a node near you that had a optical, fiber connection to that node, so that just that last 300 feet was 5G. But now they've taken in some of the lower frequency bands and calling them 5G, putting the 5G interconnected network, incorporating that the 700 megahertz and the 800 megahertz bands into 5G, which spreads it out, gives them much more coverage. So it's not as bad as it used to be. The coverage is a lot better now. But the millimeter wave 5G, the super ultra fast version, that's where you get the high speed, the high data rate. That is still kind of limiting, and as a broadcast media, it's not great without external antennas, outside.
Guy?
Yeah, that's a really interesting space to watch. My son does telecom installs, and at the WSU Pullman campus, they're going to be the largest campus on the West Coast that has 5G everywhere, and they put them on every light pole. So this broadcasting over 5G to a place that has, like Courtney was saying, fiber just piping up to these poles. Now all of a sudden you've got the ability to kick out a stream to these special devices. The article is very interesting. Thank you for pointing us to that, Roscoe. I didn't realize that was a thing, but you need a special device.
Let's go to the next question.
From Alex 4D Goldner in London, 3D rigs for cameras that allow capture a proper 3D across more than 180 degrees of video. Dual fisheye won't cut it when it comes to capturing sport, because 180 degree production benefit greatly from capturing much more.
Alex, you deal with this a lot. What do you think?
Yeah, we did a lot of 360 for sports, and we kind of all moved away from it. And, when NextVR came out, we thought that 180 is not going to be enough, but it turned out that it was, for the most part. Most spectator sports, now, of course, if you want to be in the middle of the field, that's a whole different problem. But if you're talking about 180 degrees and going further around, there just isn't that much to look at around it. It's not that there's nothing to look at. It's that it's not enough to go through the trouble that it takes to support it. So when you switch to 180 degrees, the level of complexity on many levels, everything from lighting, crew, sensor stitching, all those things just immediately go away. And so, everything is now just in front of you, and our ability to support it is much more, so from a practicality perspective, you can just do a lot. You can get it into a lot more places. The trouble, as Alex might be pointing out as well, is that you're now, most of our stereo 180s are working on basically projecting those dual 180s onto a single sensor. And so it needs, an 8K sensor, et cetera. There are other ways to do that. There's dual next to, like, for instance, a studio, the BlackMagic studio, micro studios, if they had a larger sensor in them, if they were a full frame sensor, you could really do some really interesting things when it comes to delivering two stereo eyes back to it. I actually have rigs that will fit those cameras that will do two stereo eyes. But the other thing is, if you look at like the Sphere camera is 18K. It takes a small army to run, but it gives you a sensor large enough that you could theoretically put stereo on where your per eye is much larger than what we're doing now, and much higher resolution. And then the other thing you want to do is look at frame rate. Stereo 180 gets much better at higher frame rates. So 30 frames a second or 60 frames a second is cute, but 120 frames a second at 8K per eye it's a different experience. And I think that I've been thinking about this a lot over the last week. Is things happen. We think of things like it's like it's like a jump from being water to ice. We think that things go like this a lot, but they don't. They go to where they reach critical mass, and so a lot of times it goes like this, and then all the things are fixed, and it goes like that. And you just have to keep watching that, because when we think about all these things, they didn't work. It's because they were trying to do it in 24 frames a second. They were trying to do it in less than 120 frames a second. But when you get all those pieces together, it changes state, and I think that, and it happens in a snap, not in a gradual process. And people looking for gradual processes oftentimes get left out.
See if we can finish up these next two. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago. With the talk of Eclipse and solar bursts, I'm curious if there will be innovation in power storage.
Alex?
It's constantly, the batteries are constantly getting denser, and the solar cells are constantly getting better, although who knows what would survive a solar burst. But I think that, a major solar burst, not like the little ones we've had so far. But I think that that's I think that possibly, but I think that every year we see more and more dense storage capabilities and better ways to charge it.
Last question.
From Alex 4D Goldner in London, apart from the office hours experience, will we see anything at NAB that will help make events as large as NAB work on a hybrid basis? Alex?
I don't want to sound arrogant, but I think we're on the sharp edge, the sharp end of the stick of this one. Like, it's not. I mean, most of the other stuff is really focused on people who are there, so there's not much hybrid happening at NAB, in my opinion. There's options of doing a little bit of it. There's a lot of people recording that'll put some videos out later. But I think that, we're really trying to figure out how to really bring the experience to everyone. This is the biggest push. We're only doing it 3 hours a day. Our goal is to get to, all the opening hours in a couple of years, depending on, whether, how we do. But I think that, I don't see a lot of I watched CES, and other than Guy's coverage, there was nothing live. There was nothing, nothing came out live there. And so I think a lot of people did really boring live for a long time at NAB, CNET and other folks, and at CES and everything else. And I think they just gave up, because having discussions around a table, talking about it at the space, you could do that over Zoom now. We do this every day. So what we're trying to really focus on is how do we connect people to what's there? And how do we give you something that you can see and discuss of what's there? And I don't see anybody else doing it, but we'll keep our eye on it. We want to learn from anybody else that's taking that on. But it's also, I think if what we say is that, we took this on, not because it was easy, but because we thought it would be easy. And so this has turned into a very expensive process for us to get done, but we're really excited about it, and we hope that you enjoy it. We'll keep moving forward.
Thanks for watching today. Tomorrow, don't forget, we are also talking about NAB. Tomorrow, our focus shifts a little bit. So come back for day 2 of talking about what's going to happen at NAB. Thank you to everybody involved in this. As always, all the producers who got your questions in, thank you for driving the show with what you want to talk about and for voting those questions up and down. We can't do this show without you every day. That is also true of both the panelists who show up here to talk about things, everybody who volunteers their time as content providers here to try to answer your questions, and our incredible back-end crew who shows up every day, this village of people in cyberspace who show up from literally all across planet Earth and help bring this show to you. We appreciate their efforts every single day, and it's amazing work. We will be back tomorrow doing the same thing at the same time, and our Tolok traversal today, we managed 72,000 miles. That's 116,000 kilometers kilometers or 570 million bananas for scale. See you tomorrow.
Open all these boxes.
Are you getting
metric
boxes
bananas or
yesterday
Chiquita
from
bananas?
Sony? What?
Oh, are those metric bananas or Chiquita bananas? Yeah.
Imperial. They're Imperial Chiquita.
bananas.
I think I've
It
heard
is
that they're
the
Imperial
standard
Chiquitas.
banana.
Yeah. I don't even know if we can call them bananas anymore. They're just Chiquitas. And that's a failure in branding. Chiquitas.
And there you go. They could have popped onto that. Chiquitas for scale.
Yeah, Chiquita for scale. There's an ad campaign there. What are we doing this show? Like, let's go make that ad.
I think we can license an AI Carmen Miranda. I think.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Thanks.